Hello and welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. The World Health Organization has said that Gaza is facing a man-made mass starvation after a warning from over 100 aid agencies. Meanwhile, Hamas says it has submitted a response to the latest Gaza peace proposal. Fresh drone strikes have been launched from both Russia and Ukraine following the conclusion of peace talks in Istanbul. Further prisoner exchanges have been agreed, though the sides remain far apart over potential ceasefire terms. Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with top EU chiefs in Beijing, kicking off a summit set to be dominated by trade and the Russia-Ukraine war. China has sought closer ties with the EU amid global trade tensions over US tariffs. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron have discussed the ongoing EU-US trade dispute. Diplomats from the 27-nation bloc say they are heading towards a 15% deal with the US, though retaliatory tariffs are being prepped in case a deal isn't struck. In the meantime, talks between South Korea and the US have been postponed, this because of a scheduling conflict, the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Talks will be rescheduled as Seoul aims to make a deal ahead of Trump's August 1st deadline. The White House has slammed a new claim made in the US media relating to the relationship of President Donald Trump and late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. They call it fake news. The claim says Trump knew his name was in case files on Epstein amid pressure for them to be released. Thailand has sealed the entire border with Cambodia as fresh clashes lead to at least one death. Both nations' militaries exchange fire at the disputed border, with the Southeast Asian nations blaming the other for opening fire. And the Hindu community in Melbourne are outraged after a temple was defaced with racist graffiti. An attack on the Sri Swaminarayan temple in Baronia has been described as an assault on faith and identity, with officials condemning the incident. But we start this hour with some breaking news, and a search operation is underway in Russia's Far East after air traffic controllers lost contact with a 24-passenger plane on Thursday. The aircraft, operated by Siberia-based Angara Airlines, disappeared from radar while approaching Tynda in the Amur region near the Chinese border. Regional Governor Vasily Orlov said about 50 people were on board, including 6 crew and 5 children. Conflicting reports from the Emergencies Ministry suggest the number may be closer to 40. Rescue teams have been deployed to locate the missing plane, and we, of course, here will bring you all of the latest updates as we get them through on this potential tragedy, though information, of course, is limited. Moving on now, and at a tense Beijing summit, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen urged a rebalancing of trade with China, calling the bloc's €300 billion trade deficit unsustainable. She said ties stand at an inflection point, demanding China address overcapacity and its perceived support for Russia's war economy. EU leaders also hinted at a broader US trade pact to counterbalance Chinese dominance in global supply chains. Let's listen now to Antonio Costa, the European Council President, and Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President.
The world is going through a period of global uncertainties, marked by economic volatility, geopolitical tensions, as well as challenges facing entire humankind.
Our relationship is one of the most important and consequential in the world. In fact, in terms of total trade, the European Union is China's largest trading partner, and China is the EU's third. Our bilateral trade in goods now exceeds €2 billion per day. Europe has supported China's economic developments for decades and continues. We have reached an inflection point. Rebalancing our bilateral relation is essential. Because to be sustainable, the relations need to be mutually beneficial. Better achieve this, it is vital for China and Europe to acknowledge our respective concerns and come forward with real solutions.
Well, joining us to discuss this meeting and those comments that we've just heard from the EU chiefs, Andrew KP Leung, a China strategist who is joining us live from London. Andrew, as always, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. We've heard Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa talking about rebalancing the current situation relating to trade between China and the EU, a surplus of hundreds of billions of dollars. How do you think this will be received by President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party amidst wider tariff and trade tensions?
China is well aware and agree with von der Leyen that the world is facing an inflection point in the sense that the whole world order, which has been maintained since the end of the Second World War, led by the so-called rule-based order, has now been thrown out of the window, replaced by American first coercion and rules of the jungle. The second thing is that, of course, there is a great imbalance between in trade, investment between the European Union and China. From the European Union perspective, there is a lack of reciprocity in market access. But also China's manufacturing. China, of course, is the world's, by far the largest manufacturer in the world. You will look at the world's products ranging from heavy cranes in container ports to very heavy drilling equipment in tunnels to household goods. The vast majority is now produced in China, but even if the products are not made in China, China is embedded in it in terms of rare earths, components, parts, and also logistics, because the world's top 7 container ports out of the top 11 are located in China. So the idea of decoupling, entire decoupling, is a pipe dream. Of course, there is some decoupling, but it's not possible to really wean off the world's entirely from China's overarching manufacturing capacities around the world. Hence, there's this imbalance because China's manufacturing is so competitive. Look at the electric cars. Even though with tariffs, but China's cars are so advanced in technology at such a high quality-price ratio that no other countries can really compete with it, even with tariffs. But that would destroy the manufacturing car industries in Europe and the United States, and it's no good for China.
Andrew,
so I think that
sorry to interject.
For some rebalancing.
Andrew, apologies to interject there. I want to quickly go on to some comments that were made by President Xi. If you do hold on with us, President Xi has told EU leaders on Thursday that China remains a critical partner, calling for trust and cooperation over confrontation. He urged the bloc to make correct strategic choices and resist what Beijing sees as a hawkish EU stance on trade and Russia. Here is what President Xi had to say.
国际形势越是严峻复杂，中欧要加强沟通，增进互信，深化合作，以稳定健康的中欧关系为世界提供更多稳定性和确定性。
Well, new EU sanctions on Chinese banks and defended its industrial policies amid EU claims of overcapacity and unfair trade. State media stressed common ground in climate and trade, downplaying rivalry and calling for stability in global governance. China warned that worsening ties could harm economic recovery and disrupt global supply chains further. While tensions remain over electronic vehicles and rare earths, both sides expressed hopes of progress on climate and trade cooperation. Well, joining us once again, Andrew KP Leung. Thank you for staying with us. Positive comments coming from China, but of course an acknowledgement in the differences, not just on trade, but also potential geopolitical situations. Let's look at what China is hoping for in its relationship with the European Union. Of course, in the face of action from the United States, which has potentially alienated and isolated countries that were previously trading with the North American economy. Where does China stand on that? And how could a better relationship with the EU further strengthen China's position on the global economic scale?
I think there's a reference for concrete measures because narrative is cheap, talk is cheap. And at the end of the day, the balancing needs some concrete measures. So what are some of the concrete measures? First of all, I think that there is a big difference in the mindset, the style, and also the national psyche between the Western world and China. China's approach is always holistic. In other words, you just can't slap me or stab me in the back on one hand and try to shake hands with me on the other. So it's a kind of more holistic approach in the whole relationship. Whereas, of course, especially in the Trump administration, it's one thing, they impose tariffs and sanctions, and on the other hand, want to kiss you on both cheeks. But this is not going to work for China. But on the other hand, China needs to deal with the kind of psychology in the Western mind, in the sense that, well, they put a great deal of emphasis on values, on human rights, for example. And of course, as far as the EU is concerned, on Russia. Russia is now deemed to be an existential threat to Europe's security, particularly in the light of Trump's almost unilateral trying to end the war behind the European Union's back. So I think that Europe expects China to play an important role, and ideally almost decoupling from Russia's economy. But again, that is not possible because both China and Russia's economy have been joined at the hip even well before the war in Ukraine. So I think that there are a number of fundamental differences. Now, coming back to the concrete measures, I think first of all, China needs to generate jobs and help the European economy by maybe relocating part of the manufacturing processes in Europe. And I've taken an example from London, where I am. Every day, I see more and more of these black caps new energy cars called LEVC. LEV stands for London Electric Vehicles. C stands for Coventry. These cars now made in Coventry in the UK, but is invested by China's biggest car manufacturer, Geely. So this model can be replicated or can be expanded around Europe, stabilizing Europe's manufacturing industry, car industry,
Yes.
which is, of course, an important pillar to many European economies. Secondly, China needs to open up its market and to allow greater market access. Because China's economy is changing, it's a great potential for internal consumption and great market for European products and services like health, as well as
Yes,
healthcare,
Andrew,
health
unfortunately,
products and so on.
I'm sorry to interject once again. We are unfortunately out of time, but thank you ever so much for that insight and your time on the programme today. We will, of course, continue to look at the China-EU trade, but we stay with trade now and head to South Korea, where top talks between South Korean and American officials on President Trump's tariffs have been postponed due to a scheduling conflict for US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, South Korea's finance ministry said today. The two sides plan to reschedule the 2+2 meeting, which was set for Friday in Washington. South Korea's finance minister, Koo Young-chul, was expected to attend in hopes of avoiding 25% tariffs set to take effect on August the 1st. The postponement raises doubts about a possible deal. Kospi stock index fell on this news. Washington has given no further details. Also, according to Korean media, South Korea will invest more than $100 billion as part of a trade deal with the US. Well, joining us to discuss this development, once again on the programme today, Dr. Satoru Nagao, a fellow at the Hudson Institute, joining us from Tokyo, Japan. Dr. Nagao, thank you ever so much for joining us. How significant is this delay? Of course, with a deadline approaching now, just over a week away, a significant delay potentially impacting the tariffs and the economy of South Korea.
Yes, it is true. This is very important because the deadline is approaching next week. Only 1 week is the time. And at the same time, when we check the US deal with other country, firstly the British, but after that Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, all of these countries are US allies and partners and in the Indo-Pacific. So that's why the U.S. is choosing the country to deal based on their security priority view from this map. So that's why the South Korea, the Taiwan, the EU, the India, these countries are lining up, I think, except so the U.S. is negotiating many countries at the same time, but this area a priority for the U.S. That's why they choose. So if the U.S. postpones the South Korea, of course, this is based on the schedule, but at the same time, this is a message to priority. Which country is a priority for the United States? So that's why this is serious for the South Korea, and this is a pressure for South Korea to consider a little more. So that could happen, I believe. Thank you.
Absolutely, Dr. Nagao. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Of course, the topic of trade and the conversation around trade is set to heat up with that deadline, August the 1st, fast approaching. But we now move over to North America. In a new report, the Wall Street Journal has alleged that President Donald Trump was informed by Justice Department officials in May that his name appeared in the files related to financier Jeffrey Epstein. The White House, however, has dismissed the report, calling it part of ongoing fake news stories against the US president. The Justice Department also decided not to continue investigations into Epstein's activities. According to the reports, the US House Committee has subpoenaed Ghislaine Maxwell to testify in connection with the case. This development continues to stir controversy and scrutiny around the Epstein investigation. Well, joining us to discuss this topic that is causing issues for the Trump administration, not just from opposition of the Trump regime, but also from within his core MAGA group. Jim Rice, Professor of International Law, joining us from Vigan in the Philippines. Jim, thank you for your time. This one is not going away for Donald Trump. Further reports in the US media, the CNN reporting something overnight, also the Wall Street Journal, alleging that Trump is in these Epstein files. What's your reaction to these allegations, and how is Trump going to circumnavigate probably the hardest moments in his second term so far?
Well, yeah, I think that your introduction was excellent, and I think that you really summarized all of the main points. I can only add a few things, which are that, first of all, if the Wall Street Journal report is true, and there's no reason to suggest that it's not, then it is highly improper. It is highly improper for the Attorney General of the United States to reach out to the president and give him an indication that the president is in the files. This should never have been done. But in addition to that, it proves, or it shows very strongly, that Trump is in the files, and although there's no proof that means that there's something improper or wrong or criminal, it certainly is a bad look for Trump, and it certainly implicates him in this scandal.
Jim, why would the Trump administration make such a big point about releasing these files if there was knowledge from the man at the top of the tree that he was named in them? This doesn't make much sense on the surface, but why do you think that set of circumstances has been taken place?
Well, of course, it just makes him look more and more guilty. And in addition to that, sending the Deputy Attorney General down to Florida, where Ghislaine Maxwell is detained for having been convicted on a 20-year sentence, makes him look even more guilty, because it would seem that a secret deal is being cooked up, that they are going to bring Ghislaine out, and she's going to exonerate Trump or say something of that nature. And then, of course, Trump will be able to say to his followers, see, there's nothing to see here. But as you pointed out correctly, these kinds of deflections make him look more and more guilty every single day.
Absolutely. Jim Rice, thank you ever so much for taking the time to join us. We will bring you all the updates on this ongoing political merry-go-round relating to the Epstein files over in the United States. Moving on now, though, and in Melbourne, the Sri Swaminarayan temple in Baronia was defaced with racist graffiti, sparking outrage within the local Hindu community. The temple, a key spiritual hub, was targeted with hate-filled slurs alongside two nearby Asian-run restaurants. The attack, described as an assault on faith and identity, has prompted condemnation from community leaders and authorities. Victoria's Premier Jacinta Allen called the act hateful, racist and deeply disturbing, reaffirming support for the community. Police are investigating the incident, which is part of a broader wave of hate-based attacks on cultural sites in Melbourne. Despite the shocking incident, local faith leaders are rallying for unity and solidarity. Well, joining us to discuss this horrific defacing of a temple at a point, of course, where incidents like this are seemingly more prominent in the face of so much uncertainty and so much potential hate. Joyita Basu, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, joining us live from New Delhi. Joyita, faith leaders talking about unity in a moment of deep concern. What's your overall opinion on what's happened and how authorities have reacted to it?
Well, the thing is, you see, racism has always existed in Australia, in any part, wherever Indians have gone, they have always faced racism. But it seems worryingly, what we are witnessing in the last few years, I would say, concerted racism against Indians, and it is Indians and particularly the Hindus, because of the, I would say, campaign that has been going on against Hindus on the world stage, in the USA, in the UK, of course, in Australia. The campaign that has been going on against Hindus by certain groups.
Well, we seem to have lost Joyita for a moment. You are back with us. Sorry, Joyita, you just cut out. Please continue.
Yeah, the thing is, you see, so this, and you see, if you go to X social media, for example, X in particular, what you see over there, constant rant against it, the most vile attack on Hindus and definitely Indians in general. What happens is, you see, racism is normalized, so as a result of which it is, there are always hotheads everywhere, and some hotheads decide to act. So that is why it's extremely important to start with not just faith meetings and all. You need to basically cleanse social media of all sorts of racism and hateful attack, and be that in any community.
Yes, Joyita Basu, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. This incident is something we will continue to monitor and bring you all the updates on further reaction. But we move on now, and French President Emmanuel Macron and First Lady Brigitte Macron have filed a defamation lawsuit against American commentator Candace Owens. The case, filed in Delaware, accuses Owens of spreading false claims that Brigitte Macron was born male, a long-debunked conspiracy. Owens has repeated the claims on her podcast and to her millions of followers on social media. Earlier this year, she released a video series titled Becoming Bridget and said she would stake her entire reputation on the theory. In a statement, the Macrons said they asked Owens to retract her comments multiple times, but she refused, forcing them to take legal action. Owens has dismissed the case as goofy and a desperate public relations strategy. Well, joining us once again on the programme, I thank Jim Rice for rejoining us, Professor of International Law, of course, from Vigan in the Philippines. Jim, a unique situation here. Allegations that have been made and now a defamation lawsuit. What's your opinion on the actions that have been carried out first by Candace Owens, but now that defamation suit from the Macrons?
Okay, again, this is really interesting that you would air this on the same show that we talked about the Epstein files and Trump's involvement in them. As your viewers may or may not know, Candace Owens is a far-right conspiracy blogger or podcaster. She holds influence in the same circles as people like Alex Jones and other of these far-right podcasters, and look, for example, Benny Johnson or Charlie Kirk, and she comes up with conspiracy theories frequently, and needless to I suppose your audience should know that she's deeply homophobic and very, very hostile to the transgender community. And so, given the fact that I suppose she's opposed to President Macron's policies of supporting Europe and supporting NATO, she came up with this absurd conspiracy theory suggesting that Macron's wife is not a woman. It really kind of staggers belief. Now, defamation suits, again, are very, very hard to win, especially if the plaintiff is a famous person or a politician. So the standard is under American law to show absolute or actual malice, and it's a high standard. And in addition to that, defamation suits are really kind of what one would say is rich person's toys. So my belief is my suspicion is this case won't really go anywhere.
Yes.
But I suppose it's the Macron's attempts to try and clear the air and to try and defend the honor of his wife.
Yes, absolutely, Jim. Thank you once again for joining us and providing that unique insight. It is another topic we will continue to monitor here on NewsX World. But now it's time for the latest from across the world of business. Alphabet, SK Hynix and Infosys have all reported strong earnings, beating market expectations and issuing positive guidance despite ongoing US trade policy volatility. Alphabet and SK Hynix plan increased spending, with the latter posting profits driven by AI chip demand and tariff-related stockpiling. Infosys raised its annual revenue forecast, signalling steady demand. While global supply chains remain under pressure, top tech firms appear confident in navigating the challenges ahead. Meanwhile, Nestlé has also reported stronger than expected organic sales growth for the first half of the year, driven by price increases in coffee and cocoa products to offset input cost inflation. The world's largest packaged goods food company reaffirmed its 2025 outlook, projecting improved sales growth compared to 2024 and targeting an operating profit margin of at least 16%. Deutsche Bank have posted a stronger than expected profit of €1.485 billion in quarter two, rebounding from a €143 million loss a year earlier. Germany's largest lender overcame mixed performance in its investment banking division and a currency-related hit from a stronger euro. The result surpassed analyst expectations of around 1.2 billion euros, signalling resilience despite ongoing market challenges. Hyundai Motor reported a 16% drop in second quarter operating profit to 3.6 trillion won, impacted by US tariffs on vehicles and parts. Despite the tariff-related cost of 828 billion won, the automaker slightly beat analyst estimates and maintained its full-year profit target. Well, that is all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.